She thought she was marrying a dying man just to save her mother's life. But on their wedding night, he turned to her and said, "I'm not the one who's sick." That was the moment Amaka knew she had walked straight into a lie that would change everything. A fake bride, a secret heir, a betrayal that runs deeper than blood. This isn't just a love story, it's a war between loyalty and greed, between truth and survival, and a village girl who dared to take her sister's place in a mansion full of secrets. It started like any other day. The sun was hot, the streets were busy. Amaka had just returned from the market when she heard a loud crash inside the house. She dropped her bag and ran in. Her mother, Mama Nkechi, was lying on the floor, her eyes closed, her body shaking. Mama, can you hear me?" No response. Amaka screamed for help as neighbors rushed in. Someone called a taxi. Together they carried Mama Nkechi into the car and rushed to the hospital. At the emergency room, the nurses took her mother inside. Amaka paced the hallway, her heart racing. She didn't know what was happening. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a doctor walked out holding a file. "Are you the daughter?" Amaka nodded quickly. "Your mother needs emergency surgery," he said. "She's bleeding internally. We'll need to operate immediately." Amaka swallowed hard. She could barely speak. "How much?" "N3 million deposit." Her mouth went dry. "N3 million? She didn't even have N30,000. "Doctor, please, can't you start? I'll pay something first." "We don't start surgery without deposit," he said firmly. He walked away, leaving her standing there in shock. Amaka sat on the bench outside the ward, tears falling down her face. What was she going to do? She had no job, no savings, no relatives that could help. There was only one person left, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Her father, Chief Eze. She didn't want to go to him. He had abandoned her and her mother long ago. He had a new family now, a big house, cars, everything. And he had made it clear they were no longer part of his life. But she had no choice. Her mother was dying. That evening, Amaka arrived at his mansion. The guards looked surprised to see her. One of them hesitated, then let her in. Inside, she saw her father's wife, Auntie Uloma, lounging on a sofa drinking juice. Her half-sister, Adaora, was scrolling through her phone. They looked up as Amaka walked in. "Well, look who the cat dragged in," Adaora said. Amaka ignored the insult and turned to her father, who had just walked in. "Papa, please, Mama is in the hospital. She collapsed. The doctor said she needs surgery. I need 3 million naira." Chief Eze looked at her for a moment. Then he sighed. 3 million. Amaka, I have other responsibilities. I can't just throw money around. It's for her life, Amaka said, her voice shaking. Auntie Uloma scoffed. That woman. After all the disgrace she brought this family? You're lucky we let you in. Adaora laughed quietly. You should try GoFundMe. Tears filled Amaka's eyes as she looked at her father again. Please. But he turned away. I'm sorry. Later that night, just as Amaka was sitting by her mother's bedside, Adaora walked into the hospital room. She was wearing heels, perfume, and a sly smile. I have a proposal, Adaora said. Amaka stood up. What do you want? There's a man, Obina, wealthy, powerful, but he's dying. Our family's arranged marriage, but I'm not interested. Okay? Amaka asked, confused. You marry him instead. Pretend to be me. No one will know. In return, I'll pay for your mother's surgery. Deal? Amaka stared at her, shocked. You want me to lie? It's just for show. He'll die soon anyway. Amaka looked at her mother, unconscious and fragile. She nodded slowly. Deal. The next morning, a black car pulled up in front of the hospital. Two men stepped out in suits. One opened the door and nodded at Amaka. We've come to take you to the Lee mansion. Amaka looked back at the hospital building, her heart heavy. She had kissed her mother's forehead one last time before leaving her in the nurse's care. Now she was on her way to become a bride, but not as herself. As Adaora. The ride was long and quiet. The windows were tinted, hiding the world outside. Amaka sat still, holding her small bag on her lap. Her dress was borrowed. Her hair was tied back simply. She didn't feel like a bride. She felt like an actress in someone else's story. When the car finally slowed, she looked up and gasped quietly. The mansion was huge, bigger than anything she had ever seen. Tall iron gates opened slowly. A long driveway curved through a neat garden with trimmed flowers, leading to a white building that looked like a hotel. The car stopped at the front steps. A maid stood at the entrance. She didn't smile. Amaka stepped out of the car. "Welcome, madam," the maid said, though her voice was stiff. She followed the maid through the tall doors. The air inside was cold. The walls were white and shiny. Gold decorations hung from the ceiling. The whole place smelled like new furniture and silence. Other staff passed by. Guards, maids, drivers. Each one glanced at her with quiet curiosity. Some looked confused. Others suspicious. No one looked warm. The maid led her to a guest room and opened the door. "You'll stay here until the ceremony is over," she said. Amaka stepped inside. The room was beautiful. Big bed, mirrors, and a wide window. But she didn't feel welcome. "The wedding will be small," the maid added. "Family only. Be ready in 1 hour." She closed the door and left without another word. Amaka sat on the bed, her heart pounding. She was really doing this. Pretending to be someone else. Marrying a stranger. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Just stay calm," she whispered to herself. An hour later, dressed in a simple white gown, Amaka was led to a private room. The ceremony was quiet. No guests, no music, no smiles. Just a man in a suit reading from a paper. 2 witnesses signed beside her. She signed her name as Adaora. Then the groom entered. Amaka looked up. Obina. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit. His steps were slow. His face was pale, tired. He looked like someone who had been through months of pain. He didn't smile. He didn't say a word. He just looked at her once, then signed his part of the paper. "Congratulations," the man said. "You are now husband and wife. No ring, no vows, just papers." Amaka was now someone's wife. To a man who didn't even look at her. That evening, the house was quiet. As she passed the hallway, she heard whispers. 2 maids were talking behind the kitchen door. "She doesn't act like Madame Adaora at all. I heard she's not the real bride. The young master hasn't even spoken to her. Something's wrong." Amaka stepped back slowly, heart racing. They were already suspecting. She had to be careful. Very careful. She walked to her new room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. She was no longer Amaka from the village. She was Adaora, the bride of a dying man in a house full of secrets. And this mansion? It felt more like a trap than a home. Amaka sat alone in her new bedroom. It was beautiful, larger than her entire house back in the village. A wide bed with soft white sheets, golden curtains, and expensive artwork on the walls. But none of that comfort reached her heart. She had just been married, yet there had been no joy, no celebration, and no love. The ceremony had been quick and cold. Obina hadn't looked at her more than once. He didn't even say her name. Now she sat there in silence, her fingers locked together, unsure of what came next. The door opened gently. Obina stepped in. He had changed into a dark robe. He walked slowly like someone weak and sat down on the armchair across the room. He looked at her without smiling, his eyes calm but unreadable. Amaka stood up, unsure of what to say or do. "Should I leave you to rest?" she asked, her voice soft. Obina didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in the chair, crossed one leg over the other, and looked at her for a long time. Then in a quiet voice he said, "I'm not the one who's sick." Amaka blinked. "Sorry?" He repeated himself. "I'm not the one who's sick." Her stomach tightened. She stared at him, completely confused. "But they said you were dying," she whispered. "They told me you had only a few months." He gave a short, dry laugh. That's what they told you. That's what they wanted you to believe. She took a step back, her heart beginning to race. Then why? Why the fake marriage? Why the lie? Obinna looked away. Everyone wants something from me. My name, my money, my seat at the table. But no one has ever come to me without expecting something in return, so I created a lie to see who would play along. Amaka was speechless. So this entire thing, her signing papers, pretending to be Adaora, stepping into a life that didn't belong to her, it was all built on a lie? Why me? She asked finally, her voice shaking. Obinna looked at her again. Because I knew she wouldn't come, Adaora. And yet here you are. Amaka swallowed hard. Her head was spinning. I didn't come for your money, she said. I came because I had no choice. My mother is in the hospital. She's dying. Obinna's face didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, just a little. Then maybe you're different, he said softly. Amaka sat down on the edge of the bed. Her hands were cold. This wasn't what she expected. She had come here to pretend, to play a role, to help her mother. But now, the man she had married wasn't dying. He wasn't weak. He was watching, testing. So, what happens now? She asked. Obinna stood up and walked to the door. You stay. Play your part, just like everyone else. He opened the door, then paused. And Amaka, he said, using her real name for the first time. She looked up, surprised. Be careful. This house is full of people who lie. Then he walked out, closing the door behind him. Amaka sat there, frozen. He knew. He knew everything. And now? She didn't know who was pretending more, him or her. One thing was clear. This marriage was not what it seemed. And her biggest mistake might not be agreeing to the deal. It might be staying. Amaka was now living in a mansion, wearing expensive clothes and eating food she couldn't pronounce. But inside, she felt lost. Every morning she woke up, wondering how long she could keep pretending to be someone she was not. She didn't know how to act rich. She didn't know how to speak like Adaora. She didn't even know how to sit properly at the long dining table with 3 forks and 2 glasses. The staff watched her like hawks. Some whispered behind her back, others stared with blank faces. She smiled when they expected it. She stayed quiet when they judged her. She kept her head down and followed the house rules. But the truth was, Amaka was drowning. One afternoon, Obinna surprised her. Let's go out, he said. You need a few things. She stared at him unsure. Out, like into town? He nodded. We'll go to the mall, don't worry. I'll be with you. It was the first time he had offered anything. She didn't want to say no. The luxury mall was shining with glass and gold. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine. Amaka held Obinna's arm, feeling out of place in her expensive clothes. Her heart beat fast with every step. They entered a high-end store. The staff there smiled until they looked closely at Amaka. Then their smiles faded. One woman leaned over and whispered something to her colleague. They laughed. Obinna noticed. He frowned but said nothing. Amaka picked a simple handbag. Obinna handed over his black card without hesitation. But just as they turned to leave, a familiar voice called out from behind them. Well, well, I see someone is enjoying my life. It was Adaora. She stood by the entrance in a bright red dress, her face full of fake smiles and hidden anger. Amaka froze. Obinna stepped forward. You shouldn't be here, he said calmly. Adaora laughed. I came for my dress fitting, not to see my replacement pretending to be me. Shoppers turned to look. Whispers spread. The air felt heavy. Amaka tried to step away, but Adaora moved closer. You think you can fool everyone with a new bag and fancy shoes? She hissed. You'll always be the poor girl trying to live a rich girl's life. The room spun. Amaka's hands turned cold. Her chest tightened. Her legs felt weak. And then, everything went dark. She fainted. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on a couch inside one of the private lounges. Obina sat beside her, holding her hand. "Take deep breaths," he said softly. She blinked, confused. "What happened?" "You fainted," he said. "I brought you here." Amaka sat up slowly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to embarrass you." Obina shook his head. "You didn't. They did." He stood and turned to the security guards. "Make sure Miss Adeora is escorted out. She is not welcome here." Back at the mansion, the staff lined the hallway as they entered. Some of them looked curious. Others tried to hide their smiles. Before anyone could speak, Obina turned to them. "Let me make one thing clear," he said. "This is my wife. I don't care what you heard or think. She is to be respected in this house." Silence filled the room. The staff bowed slightly. Amaka looked at him surprised. It was the first time he had stood up for her, the first time he called her my wife in front of others. In that moment, something shifted. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this after all. It was early in the morning when the mansion suddenly changed. The staff moved faster than usual. The chef was shouting instructions. The cleaner polished the same table 5 times. Everyone looked tense. Amaka stepped out of her room, confused. She turned to one of the maids. "What's going on?" The girl leaned closer and whispered, "Mama Ifunanya is coming back today." Amaka frowned. "Who is she?" "The head of the family, Obina's grandmother. She owns everything." The maid quickly walked away. Later that afternoon, a black SUV rolled into the compound. From the car stepped an older woman in a fine lace wrapper and matching scarf. Her skin was light and smooth, her eyes sharp and observant. Mama Ifunanya. She didn't smile. She didn't speak much. But when she entered the house, the energy changed completely. The guards stood straighter. The staff bowed lower. Even Obina came downstairs to greet her. "Welcome back, Grandma," he said. She hugged him gently, then looked around the room. Her eyes landed on Amaka. Amaka quickly walked over and greeted her with a small bow. "Good afternoon, Ma." Mama Ifunanya didn't respond at first. She just stared at Amaka from head to toe. "So you are the wife," she said slowly. Amaka nodded. "Yes, Ma." The old woman gave a small nod, then walked past her. No smile, no welcome, just quiet judgment. Over the next few days, Mama Ifunanya watched Amaka closely. At breakfast, she noticed Amaka didn't speak unless spoken to. At lunch, she saw how Amaka helped the maid carry a tray. At dinner, she watched how Amaka never touched the expensive wines or showed off the gold jewelry sent to her room. She didn't act like a spoiled bride. She acted like someone trying not to get in the way. One evening, Obina came into Amaka's room holding a small towel and a bottle of cream. His shirt was off. His shoulder had a deep scratch. "Can you help me clean this?" he asked. Amaka stood up quickly. "What happened?" "Just an old injury," he said. "It opened again during training." She sat him down on the chair and gently wiped the wound. He didn't flinch, but he didn't speak either. She cleaned it carefully, then rubbed the cream over it. Her hands were soft, slow, caring. He looked at her. "You've done this before?" "My mother used to fall sick often," she replied. "I took care of her most of my life." Obina nodded. There was silence. But it wasn't cold. It was warm. That night, Amaka returned to her room and found a package on her bed. Inside was a soft wrapper, a beaded necklace, and a handwritten note. "For a woman who knows how to care, Mama Ifunanya." Amaka sat on the bed, surprised. Maybe the old woman didn't hate her after all. In the days that followed, Amaka and Obina began to speak more. Little talks during dinner, quiet glances across the hall, small smiles here and there. The tension between them started to fade. Amaka still didn't know what Obina was hiding, but for the first time she didn't feel like she was just pretending. She felt like she belonged, even if it was only a little. Obina was a man of few words, but Amaka had started to notice something about him. He was watching her. Not in a harsh or suspicious way, but like he was quietly studying her. One morning she woke up to find a small box on her dresser. Inside was a soft silk scarf and a handwritten note. "You might need this." Oh. She looked around confused. Was it a gift? Or a test? Later that day, the chef approached her in the hallway. "Madam, the young master asked if you'd like to help choose the dinner menu." Amaka blinked. "Me?" "Yes," the chef smiled. "He said you might have simpler taste." She smiled back, surprised by the request. In the kitchen, she gave a few suggestions: vegetable soup, jollof rice, soft yam with sauce. The chef nodded thoughtfully and even added one of her recipes to the night's plan. It was a small moment, but it made her feel noticed. The next day, Obina didn't speak to her at all. At breakfast, he barely looked at her. At dinner, he left early without saying a word. Amaka didn't understand. Had she done something wrong? She tried not to let it bother her, but it did. She had gotten used to his quiet kindness, and now the silence felt heavy again. Later that week, she found another surprise in her room. A white pair of flat shoes, simple but elegant. No note this time. Just a gift left quietly, like before. One afternoon, Obina came home with a cut on his palm. He tried to brush it off, but Amaka didn't let him. She pulled out a clean towel and gently cleaned the wound. "You should be more careful," she said softly. Obina looked at her. "You always take care of people like this?" "Only the ones I care about," she replied without thinking. He didn't respond, but he looked away with a small smile. The chef began to greet her more warmly. The housekeeper, who had once watched her with cold eyes, now offered to help her fix a torn hem. Even the maids started opening up. "You're not like Madame Adaora," one of them said one morning. "You're nicer." Amaka smiled, but deep down she felt the pressure growing. She was still living a lie. And any day, it could all come crashing down. One evening, Mama Ifunanya called her to the upstairs lounge. Amaka walked in, nervous. The older woman sat on a soft chair, holding a small black box. "Sit," she said simply. Amaka obeyed. Mama Ifunanya opened the box and brought out a pair of gold bangles and a pair of shiny gold shoes. "These belong to my late daughter-in-law," she said. "She was a strong woman, and I see some of her in you." Amaka's eyes widened. "Ma, I don't know what to say." "Say thank you, and wear them well." Amaka's voice shook. "Thank you, Ma, truly." Mama Ifunanya gave a soft nod. "Not everyone who walks into this house earns my respect, but you've done well." That night, Amaka sat on her bed, holding the bangles in her hands. Her heart was full. Not because of the gold or the shoes, but because for once she didn't feel like a fraud. She felt seen, respected. And deep down, something was changing between her and Obina too. She wasn't sure if it was love, but it was something real. And maybe, just maybe, it was only the beginning. Amaka was finally starting to breathe again. Obina wasn't as cold anymore. The staff had softened. Mama Ifunanya had even called her strong. But peace never lasts long in a house full of secrets. Late one night, while the household was asleep, a black car stopped outside the mansion. A woman in dark sunglasses stepped out, dragging a small suitcase. It was Adaora. She had returned, but quietly without warning. A driver led her to a guest room far from the main house. "No one must know I'm here," she whispered. "Not yet." The next morning, she put on a cleaner's uniform and moved around the house, pretending to be one of the new staff. No one noticed her. Not yet. But her eyes noticed everything. She saw Amaka laughing softly in the garden with Obina. She saw Mama Ifunanya giving her a warm nod at breakfast. She saw her gold bangles, her own bangles, on Amaka's wrist. Each moment made her chest tighter. Each smile made her blood boil. One afternoon, Adaora followed Amaka quietly. She watched as Amaka sat on the back porch, helping a staff member repair a broken hem. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. This girl has taken my place, Adaora hissed to herself. And they all love her for it. Her jealousy turned into a plan. That evening, Amaka came back to her room and noticed something strange. Her favorite outfit, the gold and white dress Obina liked, was missing. In its place was a short, tight dress that looked too revealing for her taste. She frowned, but dinner was about to be served. There wasn't time to search for another outfit. She wore the dress and entered the dining hall quietly. As soon as she walked in, people stared. The staff whispered. Mama Ifunanya looked shocked. Obina raised his brow. Amaka felt her cheeks turn red. What? What's wrong? She asked. The housekeeper leaned close and whispered. That dress? It belonged to one of the dancers Obina hired for a party last year. It's not for a wife. Amaka's eyes widened. She wanted to run. She felt exposed, embarrassed. She didn't even wait to eat. She ran back to her room, locked the door, and cried. In another part of the house, Adaora smirked from the shadows. She had stolen the original dress and replaced it, and now Amaka was humiliated. But Amaka was done pretending. The next morning, she packed a small bag and left the mansion without telling anyone. She took a cab and went straight to her village. She needed to see her mother. She needed to feel normal again. When she arrived at the small hospital, the nurse smiled. Your mother is doing well. She's recovering faster than we expected. Tears filled Amaka's eyes as she sat beside the bed. Mama Nkechi opened her eyes slowly and whispered, You came. Of course, Mama. I missed you. They held hands quietly. No lies, no secrets, just love. But she couldn't stay long. She knew she had to return. If anyone found out she had left without permission, or worse, if Adaora exposed her, everything would fall apart. As the sun began to set, Amaka stood outside the hospital, looking at the fading sky. I've come too far, she said softly. I can't turn back now. The next day, Amaka woke up in her mother's hospital room. She had stayed the night, sleeping in the chair by the bed, holding Mama Nkechi's hand. It felt peaceful, like everything outside didn't exist for a while. But that peace didn't last. Just after sunrise, 2 men in white coats and a woman in dark sunglasses entered the room. Before Amaka could speak, they handed her a folder. Your mother has been transferred to another clinic, one of them said coldly. Transferred? Amaka stood up quickly. Who will prove that? It came from her sponsor, signed and paid in full. And then she saw her, Adaora, leaning by the door, arms folded, smiling like she owned the world. You disappeared, Adaora said, so I took matters into my own hands. Amaka's heart dropped. You moved my mother? Relax, Adaora replied. She's still breathing. I just gave her a place that matches your background. An hour later, Amaka arrived at the new clinic. It was in the poorest part of town. Paint was peeling off the walls. The waiting room had broken chairs. The smell of old medicine filled the air. She rushed inside and found Mama Nkechi on a weak bed with no fan, no oxygen, and one tired nurse checking her pulse. How could she do this? Amaka whispered, tears falling from her eyes. Why are you crying? A voice said behind her. She turned to see Obina standing at the doorway. Amaka ran to him, crying harder. She moved her here. Look at this place. She's not safe here. Obina didn't say a word. He looked around the room, took out his phone and made a call. Yes, send a private ambulance. Now. We're transferring her back to the specialist hospital. He placed a gentle hand on Amaka's back. I'm sorry. I didn't know. But I'll fix this. Within an hour, Mama Nkechi was back in the good hospital. Amaka sat by her side, still shaking. Obina waited until her mother was settled, then led Amaka outside to sit on the bench. You shouldn't have left without telling me, he said softly. I just wanted to see her. Everything was falling apart. I couldn't breathe. He nodded slowly. You don't have to carry everything alone. I'm here. She looked at him, her eyes full of pain. But for how long? Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Adaora was furious. Her plan had failed. Obina had stepped in and ruined it. Again. That afternoon, she stormed into her mother's salon, fuming. Auntie Uloma looked up from the mirror. What is it now? She's ruining everything, Adaora snapped. They've taken Mama Nkechi back to the big hospital. Obina helped her. Uloma shrugged. Then do something about it. I already did. And then, Adaora slapped her own mother. Hard. The room went silent. Uloma stared at her daughter in shock. Have you lost your mind? I'm tired of your weak advice, Adaora shouted. You said this plan would work, but she's still there, and now even Grandma likes her. Back at the hospital, Amaka looked at Obina. Maybe I should leave. Don't, he said quickly. You belong here, even if you don't believe it yet. She hesitated. But for the first time, she saw something in his eyes. Not just sympathy. Care. Maybe even love. And so Amaka stayed. Not because of the gold, not because of the mansion, but because one person had finally chosen to stand beside her. The house had gone quiet. Too quiet. Mama Ifunanya hadn't come down for breakfast in 2 days. The staff said she was resting, but Amaka could feel something was wrong. Obina noticed it too. Grandma doesn't stay in bed this long, he said one evening. Not even when she had malaria. Amaka nodded. Something didn't feel right. What they didn't know was that Adaora had been busy planning her biggest move yet. She had one goal left, get everything back. That included the title, the house, and the family's inheritance. Her plan? A new will. One evening, while Mama Ifunanya sat alone in her room reading, Adaora entered quietly with a cup of hot tea. Good evening, Grandma, she said sweetly. I thought you might like something warm before bed. Mama Ifunanya looked up, surprised. That's unusual of you. Just trying to fix things, Adaora smiled, placing the tea on the table. She left before the old woman could say more. An hour later, a loud thud echoed through the house. Staff rushed upstairs to find Mama Ifunanya collapsed on the floor, the teacup shattered beside her. Amaka was already running up the stairs when she heard the scream. Obina followed close behind. The house was in chaos. The family doctor arrived quickly. He checked her breathing, her pulse, her eyes. She's alive, but barely. We need to run blood tests immediately. Amaka picked up the broken teacup carefully, her eyes narrowing. This wasn't a fall. Someone did this. Obina wasted no time. He ordered full tests on the tea, the cup, and everything in the room. A day later, the results came back. The tea contained a sleeping drug mixed with a harmful chemical. But that wasn't all. There were clear fingerprints on the cup, and strands of long brown hair. DNA testing confirmed it. Adaora. At the same time, Obina discovered something even worse. A second will. Forged. Typed and printed on the same letterhead as the original, but this one replaced Amaka and Obina with Adaora's name as the sole heir to the family's wealth and business. The signature at the bottom? It looked like Mama Ifunanya's. But it wasn't real. Obina called for an emergency board meeting the next morning. Every family member was there. Auntie Uloma, Chief Eza, even extended relatives who hadn't shown up in years. The room was full of whispers. Then Obina stood. Before we begin, I'd like to share something. He laid the lab report on the table. This is the result of the test run on Grandma's tea. Gasps filled the room. It was poisoned, and the fingerprints found on the cup belonged to Adaora. Eyes turned to her. Adaora tried to speak, but Obina raised his hand. And this, he held up the fake will, was found hidden in her drawer. It names her as the only heir. He faced her directly. You didn't just try to steal the family wealth. You tried to kill the one person holding this family together. 2 security guards stepped forward. Adaora Eze, you're under arrest. "This is a setup," she screamed. "They're lying. She's the fake bride." But no one listened. Not even her own mother. As Adaora was dragged out of the room, Mama Ifunanya's nurse entered and whispered something into Obina's ear. He nodded, then looked at the family. Grandma just woke up, and she remembers everything. Amaka sat in the back of the room, stunned. It was over. The truth was finally out. But the war hadn't just exposed Adaora's lies. It had also made Amaka more visible than ever before. And now, there was no going back. The storm had passed. After Adaora's arrest, the mansion returned to a strange kind of calm. The whispers stopped. The staff stopped watching Amaka like an outsider. Mama Ifunanya had recovered fully, and her first action after waking up was clear and powerful. She called for Amaka. The old woman sat upright in her bed, her voice firm as ever. "I may be old, but I see things clearly. You're not the daughter we expected, but you're the woman this family needs." Amaka's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Ma." "No need to thank me," Mama Ifunanya said. "Just keep being yourself." The following week, Obina called another meeting, but this time it wasn't for war. It was for peace. The board members gathered around the long table. Obina stood at the head and looked around. The truth has been exposed, the threat removed. It's time to move forward. He placed his hand gently on Amaka's shoulder. "And I want to start by correcting something." He turned to the room. "Everyone, meet my wife. Not a stand-in, not a placeholder, but my chosen wife, Amaka." Some mouths opened in shock. Others smiled. No one argued, not even Chief Eza. That evening, Obina called a quiet dinner in the garden. Just a few people were invited: Mama Nkechi, Mama Ifunanya, and a few trusted staff. The garden lights glowed softly. The air was calm. A light breeze rustled the flowers. Amaka walked in wearing a soft blue dress. Her mother held her hand as they walked toward the table. She had no idea what was about to happen. After the meal, Obina stood. He cleared his throat, then turned to her. "Amaka, I've known many women in my life. Some pretended. Some wanted my name. Some wanted my money." He paused. "But you gave me something none of them ever did. Honesty, even when you were afraid." Amaka looked up, confused. Then Obina reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. "You married me out of desperation, but today, I'm asking you to marry me again. This time, out of love." Gasps echoed around the table. Mama Nkechi covered her mouth. "Obina." He knelt down, opened the box, and revealed a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "Will you marry me again? Not because you need to, but because you want to." Tears spilled down Amaka's cheeks. She looked at her mother, who was already crying. She looked at Mama Ifunanya, who gave her a proud nod. Then she looked back at Obina. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." The garden filled with quiet applause. Obina stood and slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into a gentle hug. There were no cameras, no crowd, just real people, real feelings, and a love that had survived lies, secrets, and betrayal. Later that night, Amaka sat with her mother outside under the stars. "Mama, can you believe all this?" she asked. Mama Nkechi smiled and squeezed her hand. "I always knew you were meant for something greater. I just didn't know it would come dressed like this." They laughed softly. For the first time in a long while, Amaka felt peace. Real peace. And for the first time, the ring on her finger felt like it truly belonged there. It had been a month since the proposal. The mansion was quiet, but not in a cold way anymore. It was peaceful, warm. Obina was busy rebuilding the family business. Mama Ifunanya spent her mornings in the garden. And Amaka? She finally felt like she belonged. But something had started to feel different. She was waking up with headaches, Certain smells made her nauseous, and her clothes didn't fit like before. At first, she thought it was stress. But after the third morning in a row of throwing up, she decided to visit the hospital, just to be sure. She went alone. The doctor smiled at her after running a few tests. "Madam, congratulations," he said. "You're pregnant." Amaka stared at him, confused. "Pregnant?" "Yes. About 5 weeks along. Everything looks fine." Amaka blinked. Her hand flew to her stomach. She was carrying Obina's child. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from fear, but from shock, joy, maybe even something deeper. That evening, she returned home and walked straight to Obina's study. He was going through a few papers when she entered. "I have something to tell you," she said, standing in the doorway. He looked up, sensing the seriousness in her voice. She walked over, took his hand, and placed it gently on her belly. "We're having a baby." Obina's eyes widened. He froze. "What?" She smiled through tears. "You're going to be a father." For a long second, he said nothing. Then he stood, pulled her into a tight embrace, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on us." Word spread through the house quickly. The staff congratulated her. The chef made her favorite dishes. Even the housekeeper, who once looked at her like a stranger, now smiled warmly whenever she passed. But the most emotional moment came later that week. Mama Ifunanya asked to see her privately. Amaka entered her room, unsure of what to expect. The old woman was sitting by the window, holding a folded cloth in her lap. "Come, my daughter, sit." Amaka obeyed. Mama Ifunanya looked at her for a long moment. Then she opened the cloth, revealing a tiny hand-stitched baby wrapper. "I made this many years ago for my first grandchild, but that child never came." She placed it in Amaka's hands. "Now, I want your child to have it." Tears filled Amaka's eyes. "Thank you, Mama." The old woman's eyes glistened. "This child, this baby you carry, is a blessing born from betrayal, from pain, from lies." She paused. "But it is also proof that something beautiful can come from the worst parts of life." She reached out and held Amaka's face gently. "You are no longer just the girl who was used. You are the mother of this family's future. You are the heart of our home now." Later that night, Amaka stood in front of the mirror, hands on her stomach. She remembered how it all started. Her mother on a hospital bed, Adaora's cold deal, the fear, the shame, the lies. But now, all of it had led to this. A life growing inside her. A second chance. A family she never expected. She smiled to herself and whispered, "You're already loved, little one." 1 year later, everything had changed. The mansion was no longer cold and silent. It was full of laughter, music, and the sound of soft baby cries. At the center of it all stood Amaka, no longer the quiet girl from the village, but a woman with purpose, power, and a voice the world listened to. After the birth of their baby girl, whom they named Chimamanda, Amaka's heart grew even more determined. She had seen too many women suffer in silence, too many girls with dreams buried by poverty or betrayal. So when Obina offered her the chance to lead the Ifunanya Foundation, the family's women empowerment initiative, she didn't hesitate. Amaka became the face of the foundation. She started small, supporting young women with education, helping single mothers with business grants, and funding free antenatal clinics across the city. But her biggest mission came from deep inside her heart. She returned to her late father's village, Umunu, a place that had once turned its back on her mother, the place she had once been forgotten. There, she launched a health center. Free treatment for women, a safe space for girls, and a classroom named after her mother, Mama Nkechi Hall. The opening ceremony drew attention from across the country. Cameras rolled. Newspapers published headlines like, "From Fake Bride to Nation Builder, Amaka Lee's Rise." But while Amaka was building her legacy, not everyone was rising. Adaora and her mother, once loud and proud, were were now shadows of their former selves. After Adora's arrest and the public scandal that followed, no one in high society wanted anything to do with them. Uloma lost her seat on every board she sat on. Adaora's name was removed from all family properties. They now lived in a modest flat, far from the spotlight they once craved. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Amaka sat in the garden where everything had once begun. Baby Chimamanda lay asleep in her arms. Obina sat beside her, reading quietly. Mama Ifunanya sat in a rocking chair nearby, smiling at the sight of her great-granddaughter. It was peaceful. It was real. Amaka looked down at her baby's face and whispered softly, "Do you know what they said about me, my love?" She smiled as she rocked the baby gently. They thought they could use me, break me, silence me. She looked up at the sky, her voice firm. But I became the one who transformed them all. She had been the girl nobody chose, the bride nobody wanted, the woman everyone expected to fail. But now, she was the mother of a legacy, and her story was just beginning.